Open the door! Your wife is under arrest!
We need to inspect the property immediately due to multiple violations.
Do you have a warrant?
HOA sent cops after my wife, not knowing she's the county sheriff. It sounds like some crazy clickbait title, right? I thought the same thing. Right up until fists slammed against our front door so hard the glass rattled in its frame and a voice on the other side shouted that my wife was under arrest. It was barely past sunrise, that soft gray-gold light where the neighborhood is still waking up. I was in my old flannel robe, halfway through my first mug of coffee, when the pounding started again, louder this time, like they were about to kick the door in. "Daniel Walker, open the door. Your wife needs to come with us, now." The voice had that forced authority people use when they want to sound official. My heart jumped anyway. This was Oak Ridge Hollow, the quiet cul-de-sac we'd chosen specifically because nothing ever happened here. No sirens, no drama, just sprinklers, dog walkers, and kids on scooters. I just set my mug down when Sarah stepped out of the hallway, tightening her dark hair into a ponytail, still in her workout jacket and black pants. Her eyebrows lifted a fraction, the way they did when something annoyed her more than it scared her. I moved toward the door and peeked through the thin side window. 4 men stood on our porch in matching dark tactical pants and navy shirts. Big white letters were stenciled across their backs. HOA Enforcement. They wore sunglasses even though the sun was barely up, baseball caps pulled low, hands resting a little too casually near holsters on their hips. The shirts looked cheap, shiny in the morning light, like they'd come from some online costume shop. But if you just rolled out of bed and didn't know better, you might have believed they were real. I only needed a second to recognize the tallest one in front. Greg Morrison, my neighbor from across the street. The same guy who used to borrow my ladder and brag about his grill skills now stood on my porch like the lead actor in a low-budget SWAT movie. I opened the door just enough to keep the chain in place. "Greg, what is this?" He took half a step closer, shoulders squared, mouth curled into that practiced smirk I'd grown to hate over the last few months. "Step aside, Mr. Walker," he said in a heavy, rehearsed voice. "We've received reports of a serious code violation and a potential security threat. Your wife needs to come with us for questioning." I blanked. Questioning? By the HOA? One of the guys behind him shifted like he wanted to be anywhere else. Another shot a glance up and down the street, checking who might be watching. Mrs. Jenkins' living room curtains down the block twitched. Of course she was watching. Sarah came to stand beside me, calm, eyes scanning the uniforms, the holsters, the cheap patches on their sleeves. Greg straightened when he saw her. "Ma'am, step outside. You're coming with us." Sarah's voice was flat and cool. "Do you have a warrant?" That single word hit Greg like a slap. He hesitated just long enough to tell me he had no idea what he'd walked into, and absolutely no idea who he'd chosen to threaten on her own front porch that morning. And if 4 fake officers showed up at your door demanding your spouse, what's the very first thing you do? To understand how we ended up with a fake tactical squad on our front step, you have to rewind almost 2 years, back to when Oak Ridge Hollow still looked like the answer to everything we were missing. We'd spent more than a decade in the city, drowning in sirens, traffic, and late-night construction noise. I was a civil engineer, bouncing between job sites. Sarah, as far as anyone knew, did private security consulting. It was the kind of vague job title that satisfied small talk, and I never pushed for details. By our mid-40s, we were burnt out, ready to trade chaos for tree-lined streets and kids playing until the streetlights flicked on. Oak Ridge was a brochure come to life. Identical street lamps, manicured lawns, neighbors who waved from porches. Our house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, a 2-story place with enough room for my tools in the garage and space in the backyard for Sarah to set up a workout area. The first few weeks felt like a reset button. We hosted a small cookout, met half the block, started an evening loop around the neighborhood after dinner. That's when we met Greg. Back then, he was the picture of a friendly neighbor, mid-30s, athletic, clean-cut, quick to smile. He introduced himself as both a local police officer and the neighborhood security chair for the HOA. I didn't know if that was a real title, but he wore it like a badge of honor. At first, he was almost too helpful. He came over to help me fix a leaking pipe in the garage our second week. He complimented Sarah's landscaping in the backyard, said she had an eye for detail. He invited us to a weekend barbecue and introduced us around as the model new couple. When he was in uniform, he'd wave from his driveway as we walked past, his cruiser parked out front like a built-in deterrent. People on the street talked about how lucky we were to have real law enforcement living among us. For a while, it was everything we'd wanted: quiet, safe, predictable. The first hint of trouble came when we decided to replace the weather-beaten wooden fence along our back property line. The boards were warped and splintering, and Sarah wanted more privacy for her work goals. We did everything right: checked local codes, pulled permits, hired a licensed contractor to install a 6-foot wrought iron fence. City rules allowed up to 8 feet, so we were within our rights. The day the crew started, Greg's energy changed. The casual waves stopped. Instead, he stood in his yard with his arms crossed, watching the workers like a foreman looking for an excuse to yell. His wife started hurrying past us on dog walks, eyes down. A few evenings later, he knocked on our door in a dark polo with a little shield-shaped logo that looked suspiciously like a badge without actually being one. "Dan," he said, still refusing to use my real name, "that fence of yours is gonna cause issues. You might want to bring it down to 4 feet. It's blocking my view of the street." I explained, politely, that we liked our privacy, especially since Sarah often worked from home and handled sensitive calls. His smile thinned. "As a representative of the HOA, I'm telling you we need to prioritize community harmony over individual preferences." It was the first time he used his HOA role like it came with a gun and a radio. I shut the door, feeling a small, cold knot settle in my stomach. At the time, I told myself it was nothing. I had no idea that crooked smile on my porch was the start of a war over our fence that would end with real handcuffs and flashing lights in the middle of our peaceful street. The envelope arrived 4 days after Greg's little friendly visit. Heavy paper, expensive print, the sort of thing you'd expect to see if you were being sued by someone with way more money than you. I found it in the mailbox on my way home from work. The return address belonged to a well-known local law firm. Inside was a letter that made my head spin. According to the firm, our fence violated the HOA's aesthetic standards and posed a sightline obstruction that could impact neighborhood security. If we didn't tear it down and replace it with something compliant, we'd be fined $500 a day starting in 30 days. The phrasing was slick, full of legal buzzwords and references to HOA bylaws I'd never seen. I brought it to the backyard where Sarah was mid-workout, dropping into flawless burpees without breaking a sweat. She skimmed the letter once, then again, then shook her head. "This is garbage," she said, not even breathing hard. "We're in full compliance with city regulations, and HOAs don't get to invent fines out of thin air." Her tone wasn't worried, it was irritated, like someone had cut in line at the grocery store. Still, I wasn't eager to fight a law office on pure gut feeling, so I called the number on the letterhead. The receptionist sounded confused. After a minute of keyboard clicks, she said, "Sir, we don't have any record of your property, and we definitely haven't sent any correspondence about a fence." My grip tightened on the phone. "So someone used your logo and your name?" There was a long pause. "If that's true, they committed fraud. Could you email us a copy?" By the time I hung up, my hands were shaking. Not from fear exactly, but from the realization that whatever this was, it wasn't a misunderstanding. Someone had gone to the trouble of faking legal documents to scare us. That night at dinner, Sarah was quieter than usual. She stepped away from the table twice to take calls in the hallway, her voice low, her words clipped and precise. When I asked if it was work, she gave a small, tight smile. "Complicated, that's all. Nothing I can get into right now." Over the next week, the atmosphere on our street shifted. Neighbors who had once waved now suddenly found reasons to look away. Mrs. Patterson, who'd brought us cookies when we moved in, avoided eye contact. Then the notes started. Little slips of paper left under our wipers, taped to the mailbox, tucked into the front door frame. We'd appreciate it if you worked with the community. Maybe consider lowering the fence for everyone's benefit. One wasn't so polite. Outsiders don't understand how good neighborhoods operate. Different handwriting, same pressure. Sarah collected every note, slid them into plastic bags, marked the dates, and filed them in a box in her office. She didn't rant or complain, she just documented. If the letters were the soft push, the next move was the hard shove. Greg called an emergency HOA discussion one Saturday afternoon. When I looked out the window, more than a dozen neighbors had gathered on the grass strip in front of our half-finished fence, folding chairs lined up like a jury. Greg stood at the center, wearing a shirt with another fake-looking badge on it and holding a clipboard like it was a judge's gavel. I thought the fence was the issue. I didn't realize until he opened his mouth that he was about to weaponize something far more dangerous than bylaws, my wife's silence about who she really was. I watched from the living room window as Greg paced in front of our fence, projecting his voice so everyone could hear. As you've all seen, he announced, the walkers have refused to respect our neighborhood standards. This isn't just about appearances. A fence that tall creates blind spots. You can't see what's happening in that yard. That's a security concern. A few people nodded, more out of habit than conviction. Others shifted uneasily, glancing at our house. I could feel Sarah at my shoulder, quiet, watching. Then Greg raised the stakes. And that's not all, he said, letting the words hang. Because I care about this community, I took the liberty of running a background check. My stomach dropped. He didn't have access to any legitimate system, but that didn't mean he couldn't dig. He turned toward our window, even though he couldn't see us through the glass. Our dear neighbor Sarah Walker works at a classified facility. Her exact position is marked confidential. We have no idea what she does for a living. For all we know, he paused, letting the crowd lean in, they could be connected to things that put us at risk. A ripple went through the group. People shifted back from their chairs as if distance could protect them. Someone murmured, "I have kids." Mrs. Jenkins shook her head, whispering to the woman next to her. My fists clenched so hard my fingers hurt. "He can't do that," I muttered. "He can't stand out there and—" "He just did," Sarah said, voice low. I turned to her. "We should go out there, shut this down." She kept her gaze locked on the gathering, her expression unreadable. "No," she said quietly, "let him talk. He's telling me exactly how far he's willing to go." Greg kept going, feeding off the nervous energy he'd created, repeating phrases like, "for your safety," and "as a law enforcement professional," as if saying it enough times made it true. By the time the meeting broke up, people left in little clumps, throwing uneasy looks at our windows. Some were sympathetic, some suspicious, some simply afraid. Greg, of course, walked away like a man who believed he'd claimed new territory. For the next few days, the cold shoulders intensified. Conversations in front yards stopped when we stepped outside. More notes appeared. "Please cooperate before this gets worse. Don't make the HOA take further action." Each one went into Sarah's box. Each one made that knot in my stomach twist a little tighter. Then, one night, a little after 9, I heard voices outside, low, purposeful, not the casual chatter of dog walkers. Peeking through the blinds, I saw Greg talking to 2 men I'd never seen before. They weren't dressed like neighbors. Their posture, their clipped gestures, the way they scanned the street, it all felt wrong. The next evening, Greg showed up at our door again, that same fake badge polo, arms folded. "Just a reminder, Dan," he said, "we've got a neighborhood safety inspection this weekend, HOA protocol. We'll be coming by to make sure everything is compliant." I kept my hand on the door. "Pretty sure surprise inspections aren't in any handbook." His smile sharpened. "Refusing inspection sends the wrong message. People are already nervous." That night, Sarah sat on the couch, scrolling through something on her phone, jaw tight. Finally, she said, "He's escalating. And when someone like him escalates, they stop pretending to play by the rules. I didn't understand what she meant until the power went out 2 nights later, and the quiet street outside filled with the sound of boots on gravel and murmured voices heading straight for our front door. The lights died in an instant. 1 second the house hummed with the low buzz of appliances and the TV's glow. The next we were wrapped in a heavy, unnatural darkness. The digital clock on the microwave blinked off. The air felt wrong, like the moment before a storm breaks. I was halfway to the window when I heard it, the crunch of boots on our driveway, the metallic click of our side gate, low voices trying to sound professional. Move around back, check the windows. I peeled the curtain back a fraction, and my first stupid thought was SWAT. 4 shapes in dark clothes, flashlights sweeping, radios clipped to their shoulders. Then one of them turned, and the porch light from a neighbor's house caught the white block letters on his back. HOA Inspector. If it hadn't been 2 in the morning with our power mysteriously out, it might have been laughable. Now it just felt like a threat. Greg led them up our front steps and hammered on the door. HOA inspection! Open up! His voice boomed through the quiet neighborhood, designed to wake people, to create an audience. Behind me, Sarah was already coming down the stairs, fully dressed, no trace of sleep in her eyes. "Stay here," she said, tone leaving no room for argument. "I've got it." She walked to the door with measured, almost casual steps and flipped the deadbolt, but left the chain on. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" she asked, voice calm. Greg's smirk was back in full force. "We've had reports of suspicious activity on your property," he said, flashlight beams slicing across our front windows. "We're authorized to conduct an immediate safety check. HOA protocol." Sarah's gaze flicked over their outfits. Cheap matching shirts, utility belts that didn't quite fit, 2 holsters holding pistols that looked very real. "At 2 in the morning?" she said. "Interesting protocol." One of the men behind Greg shifted his weight. "Greg, maybe we should—" "Quiet," Greg snapped, not taking his eyes off Sarah. "Ma'am, step aside. I need to verify there's nothing dangerous going on in this house." Sarah didn't move. She opened the door a little wider so the porch light fell across her face and the small metal pin on her jacket collar that looked decorative unless you knew what you were seeing. "You're on my property without consent," she said evenly, "armed, impersonating some kind of official unit, and demanding entry without cause or documentation. That's a long list of problems for you, Greg." He blinked at the use of his first name, then straightened, puffing up his chest. "I told you, I'm law enforcement. This neighborhood is my responsibility." Sarah tilted her head slightly. "Your jurisdiction, is it?" "That's right," he said. "I've been keeping these people safe long before you showed up." Silence stretched between them, the kind that hums with danger. Then Sarah spoke again, her tone dropping into something flatter, colder. "Daniel," she called without looking back, "go ahead and call the real sheriff's office. Ask for the duty sergeant and let them know we have 4 armed individuals impersonating officers on our porch." Greg's jaw clenched. "You're making a big mistake." "No," she replied, eyes locked on his. "The mistake is yours. Every second you stay here is another charge." For a moment, I thought he'd try to push past her. His hand twitched near his holster. One of his men mumbled something urgent in his ear. Finally, Greg took a step back, then another. "This isn't over," he snarled, "not by a long shot." Sarah held his gaze until they retreated into the shadows, and the power blinked back on like nothing had happened. When I shut and locked the door, my heart was pounding. Sarah stayed at the window, watching until the street was clear. Only then did I ask the question that had been growing louder in my head for weeks. "Sarah, who exactly are you?" And for the first time since I'd known her, she looked at me like she was about to open a door I hadn't even realized was there. We sat at the kitchen table lit by emergency candles, even though the power was back. the waxy smell mixing with the faint scent of gun oil drifting from the still-closed front door. Sarah filled the kettle, set it on the stove, and stood there, palms flat on the counter, as if she were bracing herself for impact. "You've had questions?" she said, without preamble. "About my job? About why I'm vague? About why I always pick the seat facing the exits?" I swallowed. Tonight kind of bumped them up the list, yeah. The kettle began to whisper as it heated. She met my eyes. "My name is Sarah Walker. I am the elected sheriff of this county. 15 years in law enforcement, 10 of those in the sheriff's office. I was sworn in last year." For a second, I just stared, waiting for the punchline that never came. Sheriff. Not consultant, not private security. Sheriff. You've been running the whole department this entire time, and you didn't think to mention it? It came out sharper than I intended. She didn't flinch. "When you wear this badge, you make enemies. Not just petty criminals. People with money, reach, grudges. People who go after families. Keeping my home life off the radar has kept us safe. Until now." The kettle shrieked. She turned it off, poured hot water into 2 mugs, then reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. "I had this running the whole time they were on the porch," she said. "Every word he said tonight is on tape." That was when it really hit me. She hadn't just been reacting. She'd been prepared. "So what happens now?" I asked quietly. "Now," she said, "I find out who Greg really is and who he's working for." Early the next morning, she was already at the dining table with her laptop open, notes spread out in neat lines. Coffee sat forgotten at her elbow. "Problem number 1, she muttered, scrolling. "There is no officer named Greg Morrison in this county. Or in the state." She spun the laptop toward me. A law enforcement database listed 0 results. He's never been sworn. Not here, not anywhere. A quick check of property records gave us his first crack in the facade. The deed to his house wasn't under Morrison at all. It was under Gregory Mitchell. When Sarah ran that name, the screen filled with hits. "Here we go," she said. 2 arrests in Arizona for impersonating an officer, 1 in Nevada for harassment. Fired from multiple private security gigs for abusing authority. Civil suits for intimidation, false reports, stalking. She clicked through file after file, her jaw tightening. And guess what all the victims have in common? Military or law enforcement families under financial stress. My stomach turned. So the fence is just an excuse. "The fence is bait," she said. "Control, fear, leverage. That's his pattern." She dug deeper, tracing shell companies tied to Mitchell, names of LLCs registered in other states, most of them leading back to one man, a real estate investor named Victor Hale, who'd been suspected of targeting vulnerable homeowners. Mitchell applies pressure on the ground, she explained. Hale swoops in to buy them out when they're desperate. They've done this in at least 2 other states. Now they're here. I looked at our half-finished fence, the notes, the fake legal letter, the 2 a.m. inspection. "So where does that leave us?" I asked. Sarah's eyes were hard now, the way they'd been on the porch when she told Greg he was running out of time. "It leaves us with an advantage," she said. "He thinks he picked an ordinary couple. He has no idea he chose a sheriff's house. And I'm going to use that to end his little operation right here on our street." If there's one thing Sarah understood better than anyone, it was how predators like Greg thought. People like him can't resist 2 things, she told me as she sketched a rough flowchart on a yellow pad: attention and opportunity. You give him a story that fits his fantasies and a chance to exploit it, and he'll show you exactly how dirty he's willing to play. Step 1 of her plan was simple: bait the hook. She opened the HOA's private group chat, Greg's pride and joy, the official channel he'd pushed everyone onto for supposed safety updates, and typed a brief message. "Just a heads up," she wrote, "we've been asked to temporarily store some equipment for a county training exercise. Nothing dangerous, but the delivery truck might arrive late at night. Don't be alarmed if there's activity in our driveway." No details, nothing classified, just enough to sound irritatingly secretive. Within an hour, 3 different neighbors had reacted with worried emojis and questions. Sarah didn't respond. She didn't have to. By late afternoon, our front yard camera, one of 3 devices she'd installed with casual efficiency, captured Greg pacing on the sidewalk across from our house, phone pressed to his ear, staring at our driveway like it had personally insulted him. Step 2 was more theatrical. Using her legitimate access, Sarah drafted a mock training inventory list on her laptop. It contained nothing sensitive, but was full of official-sounding terms: tactical storage units, controlled equipment, serialized assets. She left the document open on the screen, angled perfectly toward the front window, then adjusted the blinds so anyone standing on the sidewalk could catch a glimpse if they tried. "Isn't this a little dramatic?" I asked. "Dramatic is his language," she said. "I'm just speaking it back to him." Sure enough, the next morning, the camera hidden in the maple tree out front caught Greg on our lawn at dawn, leaning closer to the glass, phone out, snapping pictures through the crack in the blinds. Sarah downloaded the footage, labeled it with the date and time, and filed it. "He's hooked," she said. That evening, she made a call to someone she introduced to me only as Rodriguez, a captain she'd worked with on joint investigations. Through the speaker, his voice came through low and serious. "Your guy is definitely our guy," he said. "We've been looking at Hale's network for a while. Mitchell's one of his enforcers. We just haven't had clean probable cause where they're operating now." "You will," Sarah replied. "He just escalated on my doorstep." Over the next 48 hours, she built the rest of the trap. She printed a fake memo addressed to Sheriff Walker from a made-up training division, talking vaguely about relocating high-value training assets and needing temporary residential storage. Then she did something that made my stomach flip. She dropped the memo, folded into our own mailbox, and left it unlocked. By sundown, it was gone. The next day, the camera above the garage recorded Greg standing beside a silver SUV idling in front of his house, handing that same memo to a man in sunglasses. They pointed at our place, talking animatedly. Sarah zoomed in on the license plate. "That's Hale's vehicle," she said quietly. "He's here." That night, she posted one more message in the HOA chat. "Reminder, due to the upcoming equipment delivery, please keep driveways clear this week. Arrival time is classified, but it'll be within 72 hours. 20 minutes later, our street-facing mic picked up Greg's voice from across the way. "You sure it's worth something?" he said into his phone. A pause. "All right, I'll handle it. We'll get them out before the delivery." Sarah muted the playback and looked at me. "He thinks he's about to run us out of here," she said. "He has no idea he just gave us the line we needed to tie his harassment to Hale's money. And she hadn't even played her strongest card yet, the one she planned to lay down in front of the entire neighborhood." The flyers showed up the next day, folded neatly in our mailbox like an official summons. "Emergency HOA gathering," it read in bold at the top. "Community dispute resolution. Attendance strongly encouraged." The time was set for Saturday at 4 in the afternoon, right in front of our house, as if our fence were a defendant on trial. Sarah glanced at it once, then set it on the counter. "He's doing exactly what I expected," she said. "These guys need an audience. They can't resist a stage." By 3:30, folding chairs were scattered across the strip of grass by the sidewalk. More neighbors than I'd ever seen at an HOA event trickled in, clutching water bottles, whispering to each other. Some looked curious, others wary, a few downright hostile. Greg made his entrance at 10 till 4, right on cue. He wore a crisp navy polo with that same fake badge clipped to his chest, aviators on despite the overcast sky, 2 of his inspectors flanking him with clipboards like wannabe bodyguards. "Thank you all for coming," he began, projecting his voice like he was testifying before Congress. "We're here because our community is at risk. Certain residents have refused to follow our standards, and their choices affect everyone's safety." He gestured toward our 6-foot fence like it was a crime scene. "This structure blocks critical sightlines. It creates blind spots that could conceal dangerous activity. As a trained officer and your security chair, I cannot ignore that." A murmur spread through the crowd. He had always sprinkled that trained officer line into conversations. Now he was anchoring his entire story on it. "But that's not the only concern," he added, voice dropping into something more ominous. "Out of respect for your safety, I performed background research. Mrs. Walker's employment records are restricted. Her work location is classified. We don't know what she's involved in. We don't know who she's connected to. And I think we all deserve to know whether someone in our midst could bring serious trouble to our doorsteps." That did it. Some people recoiled. Others leaned forward, hungry for more. Someone whispered, "I knew there was something off." My pulse hammered. I was ready to storm outside and drag him off his plastic podium. Sarah beat me to the door, but not the way I expected. She stepped out calmly, no jacket, no visible badge, just a black blouse and jeans. She walked to the edge of our driveway and let Greg finish his sentence before she spoke. "Greg," she said, voice carrying without needing to shout, "before you go any further, I have a simple request." He blinked, thrown off by her interruption. "And what's that?" "Show everyone your police identification. Badge number, department, anything that proves you are what you keep claiming to be." The crowd shifted. A few phones came up, people instinctively recording. Greg let out a short laugh. "That's sensitive information," he said. "I can't just hand that out in public." Sarah's tone didn't change. "Every sworn officer in this county has a badge number on record. It's not secret. Providing it is routine." He stiffened. "I don't have to justify myself to you." "Good," she replied calmly, "because you won't be justifying anything to me." She walked to a small folding table she'd set up behind her earlier and opened a laptop connected to a portable projector. With a few keystrokes, a list appeared on a white sheet pinned to our fence. The official roster of active law enforcement officers in the county. She scrolled slowly. "As you can see," she said, stopping on the M's, "there is no officer named Greg Morrison." The murmurs turned into a low rumble. Before he could talk over it, she clicked again. A receipt slid onto the screen. A fake badge purchased online 8 months prior, shipped to Greg's address. "Maybe this will help jog your memory," she added. For the first time since I'd known him, Greg's smirk slipped. And Sarah still hadn't shown them who she really was. Greg's composure cracked like thin glass. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, color rising in his neck. "She's twisting things. I've been serving this community for years." Sarah didn't raise her voice. "Is this twisted too?" she asked, tapping a key. The projected image switched to grainy footage from our front yard camera. Greg at sunrise, phone held up, taking pictures through our window at the staged inventory list on her laptop. A few gasps broke from the crowd. Someone muttered, "Is that even legal?" Sarah kept going. "Or how about this?" She hit play on an audio clip. Greg's voice filled the air, clear and unmistakable. "All right, I'll handle it. We'll get them out before the delivery date." The silence afterward was heavy and ugly. Greg took a step forward, jabbing a finger at her. "You think you're clever," he spat. "You all think she's some innocent victim. You have no idea who she is, what she does, what she's capable of. I've seen her files." Sarah finally shifted. "Is this twisted too?" she asked, tapping a key. The projected image switched to grainy footage from our front yard camera. Greg at sunrise, phone held up, taking pictures through our window at the staged inventory list on her laptop. A few gasps broke from the crowd. Someone muttered, "Is that even legal?" Sarah kept going. "Or how about this?" She hit play on an audio clip. Greg's voice filled the air, clear and unmistakable. "All right, I'll handle it. We'll get them out before the delivery date." The silence afterward was heavy and ugly. Greg took a step forward, jabbing a finger at her. "You think you're clever," he spat. "You all think she's some innocent victim. You have no idea who she is, what she does, what she's capable of. I've seen her files." Sarah finally shifted. Her stance lowered a fraction, like a fighter settling into balance. "Greg," she said quietly, "you need to stop." But he was past hearing. Rage had replaced performance. "She's dangerous," he shouted to the crowd. "Trained. You really think someone like that moves into your cozy little cul-de-sac just to plant tulips and bake cookies?" His voice cracked on the last word. His hands, I realized, were trembling. Not with fear, but with that frantic feeling of losing control. He reached down, almost instinctively, toward his hip. Time slowed. I saw his fingers close around the grip of his pistol, saw 3 people stand up so fast their chairs toppled, heard someone scream, "Gun!" and the rustle of bodies scrambling backward. The barrel came up, pointed straight at Sarah's chest. My body locked. I couldn't move, couldn't shout, couldn't do anything but watch. Sarah, on the other hand, didn't freeze. Her shoulders stayed loose, her breathing steady. "Greg," she said, voice suddenly sharp as glass, "think very carefully about what you are doing right now." "Everybody stay back," he barked, sweeping the muzzle in a jittery arc that made 2 people duck. "She's the problem here, not me. She's been lying to all of you." A handful of neighbors had their phones held high, recording. I saw one kid peeking from behind his dad's arm, eyes wide with terror. Sarah's gaze flicked to the phones, then back to the gun. "Right now," she said, "you are pointing a loaded firearm at an unarmed woman in front of 30 witnesses and multiple cameras. If you squeeze that trigger, there is no story you can spin that saves you." He swallowed hard, eyes darting between her, the crowd, the phone screens. "You don't scare me," he said, but the shake in his voice betrayed him. Sarah took one small step sideways, feet planting in a stance I'd seen in her home workouts, but never understood. Her hands lifted slightly, empty, palms relaxed. "You're right," she replied. "I'm not here to scare you." For a heartbeat, everything held. The crowd, the gun, the tension wired tight as a cable about to snap. Then Greg's finger twitched. That was all she needed. Later, people would argue about the order of things, about what they'd seen. All I know is that one moment he was aiming at her chest, and the next, she wasn't there anymore. Sarah moved like someone had hit fast forward. She shifted off the line of fire in a quick sidestep, one hand snapping to Greg's wrist, the other clamping the barrel and shoving it skyward. The gun went off with a deafening crack, the shot tearing harmlessly into the air. People screamed, ducking, chairs clattering to the pavement. Before the echo faded, she twisted the weapon from his grip in a motion so clean it looked choreographed, pivoted behind him, and drove him face down into the grass. In less than 3 seconds, the self-appointed security chair of Oak Ridge Hollow lay pinned with his arm wrenched behind his back, Sarah's knee between his shoulder blades. She produced a pair of zip ties from her pocket like she'd planned this exact moment, cinching his wrists before he could process what had happened. "Greg Mitchell," she said, voice ringing out clear over his muffled curses, "you are under arrest for impersonating a law enforcement officer, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and conspiracy to commit fraud." The crowd erupted, not in panic this time, but in something like stunned relief. A few people actually clapped, then seemed embarrassed and stopped. Others just stared, phones still recording. 2 of Greg's inspectors slipped away along the sidewalk, vanishing around the corner before anyone thought to stop them. Sarah noticed. I could tell by the way her eyes tracked the edge of the group without lifting her weight from Greg's back. "Daniel," she called, not looking at me, "call the sheriff's office. Tell them I have 1 in custody and 2 fleeing the scene, possibly armed." My fingers fumbled with my phone as I dialed, voice shaking as I relayed her exact words. The dispatcher didn't question her name. They knew who she was. Patrol cars arrived within minutes, sirens wailing, lights painting the calm little street in flashing red and blue. Deputies spilled out, weapons drawn until Sarah identified herself, produced her badge, and handed over the gun she'd taken. A detective I hadn't met before, compact, sharp-eyed, looked from Greg to Sarah and shook her head. "We've been wanting this guy for a while," she said. "You just handed us everything we needed." As they hauled Greg to his feet, his bravado returned in ugly fragments. "You think this is over?" he spat at Sarah. "You think I'm the one you should be worried about? You were picked, Sheriff, long before you moved in, and when they send the next person, they won't make my mistakes." Sarah's expression barely changed, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not fear exactly, calculation. The car doors slammed, the sirens faded. Neighbors drifted away in pairs and clusters, some stopping to thank Sarah, some apologizing for believing Greg, some too ashamed to meet her gaze at all. She accepted their words with a nod, but her mind was already elsewhere. That night, our dining table turned into a war room. Printouts, property records, shell company filings, surveillance stills. A task force assembled faster than I would have thought possible. Search warrants went out. Agents hit Hale's local properties and Greg's house. They found files on dozens of families across multiple states, many with military or law enforcement ties, each case following the same pattern we just lived through. Within days, Hale was arrested boarding a private jet. News crews parked on our corner, calling it the HOA sting. On TV, Sarah looked composed, distant, every inch the sheriff they hadn't realized had been quietly living at the end of a cul-de-sac. Life in Oak Ridge Hollow slowly stitched itself back together. The fence stayed. The HOA rebuilt itself with transparent rules and actual elections. Sarah started teaching community safety classes once a month, teaching people how to spot fake authority and document harassment. The neighborhood felt safer, stronger, less naive. Almost. Because sometimes I'd catch her standing at the window just a little too long when an unfamiliar car drove by. Once we received a postcard with no return address, a picture of a quiet street in another state, and 7 words on the back. "You stopped one of them. There are more." She filed it away, called Rodriguez on a secure line, and didn't elaborate. That's the thing I've learned, living with the county sheriff whose enemies send fake cops to her door. Peace, in our world, isn't an ending. It's just the quiet space between battles. And every time I hear footsteps on the porch now, I wonder, not if they know she's the sheriff, but whether whoever sent them has any idea what kind of line they're about to cross.